If you're studying law, you know that in any trial, you're faced with a mountain of facts. But the whole case really boils down to one critical question: what gets in and what gets thrown out? The answer to that is a single, incredibly powerful concept: relevancy. So today, we're going to break down exactly what that means and how the law takes this massive philosophical idea and turns it into a practical tool you have to master, especially for your exams. Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the basic theory, this idea of relevancy as a giant chain of cause and effect. Then we'll see how that simple idea creates a huge philosophical headache. After that, we'll get into the brilliant practical solution the Indian Evidence Act gives us. And finally, we'll see how all these rules work in the real world with a high-stakes murder trial from way back in the 18th century. All right, let's start at the very beginning. At its absolute core, the theory of relevancy is all about the relationship between cause and effect. It's built on a pretty simple idea. Events in the world don't just happen in a vacuum, right? They're all connected. So if you're in court trying to prove that a certain fact happened, then any other fact that could have caused it, or any fact that was an effect of it, is logically connected. Think of it like a chain. The cause is one link, the event is the next, and the effect is the one after that. In theory, that simple connection is what makes them relevant to each other. But, and this is a big but, here's where this beautifully simple theory runs headfirst into a massive real-world problem. If you take this whole cause and effect chain and follow it to its logical conclusion, where do you stop? Is everything somehow relevant to everything else? This quote just nails the problem perfectly. It highlights the complete absurdity you get when you apply pure philosophy to a courtroom. Think about it. If a case involved an object falling, are you really going to bring in an expert witness to prove the law of gravity? Of course not. A court would grind to a halt if it had to investigate every single distant cause stretching back to the beginning of time. And that's the crucial difference you have to grasp. The law has to draw a very clear line in the sand. It separates this huge philosophical idea of universal causation from the practical needs of what we call legal relevancy. The law doesn't care about the infinite chain. It only cares about the immediate, the provable, and the traceable links that actually help decide a case. So how does the law actually draw that line? Well, this brings us to the really elegant solution provided by the Indian Evidence Act. And for any law student, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where abstract theory becomes a tool you can actually use. So instead of some vague philosophical rule like all causes are relevant, the Act does something way more helpful. It basically gives us a list. It creates these specific, named categories of connection that a court is allowed to consider. This approach makes the whole concept of relevancy clear, practical, and something you can actually work with. And this right here is the core framework you've got to know. Sections 6 through 11 are your legal toolkit. Each section is a specific type of connection that makes a fact admissible. For example, Section 7 is foundational. It covers the direct causes and effects. But then you have Section 8, which is an absolute powerhouse for criminal law. It covers 3 crucial areas: motive, preparation, and conduct, both before and after the event. These aren't just ideas. They are precise legal boxes you can put facts into to build or tear down a case. Now, theory is one thing, but seeing it in action, well, that's everything. So let's dive into a famous historical case, R. v. Donnellan. It's a murder trial from 1781 that perfectly shows how these legal principles are used to build a case, one logical link at a time. All right, let's set the scene. Our accused is a man named John Donnellan. The victim is his young, very wealthy brother-in-law, Sir Theodosius Boughton, who dies suddenly and mysteriously right after taking some medicine. And our key witness? Lady Broughton, who is the victim's own mother and was right there when he died. It's like a classic country house mystery, but one that's going to be decided entirely on circumstantial evidence. Okay, now we're going to follow the chain of evidence piece by piece, just like the prosecution did at trial. And for every single fact, we're going to see exactly why the judge allowed it into evidence by linking it back to one of those specific sections of the act we just talked about. This is how you build a case from the ground up. First things first, the prosecution had to answer the big question. Why? Why would Donnellan want his brother-in-law dead? Well, it turns out that Sir Theodosius's massive fortune would go directly to Donnellan's wife if he died. That fact is legally relevant under Section 8 of the Act because it establishes a powerful motive. And there's link number 1 in our chain. Next up, the court heard evidence that in the days leading up to the death, Donnellan was going around telling people that Sir Theodosius was in really poor health. This was a complete lie. In legal terms, this is what we call preparation, and it's also made relevant by Section 8. He was setting the stage, creating a false story to make a sudden death seem, well, less sudden and less suspicious. And now we get to the main event. Lady Broughton gives her son his medicine, and she notices something strange. It has a strong smell of bitter almonds, a classic telltale sign of poison, specifically prussic acid. Her observation, what she perceived with her senses, is a fact made relevant under Section 7 because it's a direct effect of a key fact in issue, that there was poison in that bottle. You know, what a person does after a potential crime can be just as revealing as what they did before. And what did Donnellan do? Right after Sir Theodosius died, he grabbed the medicine bottles and frantically rinsed them out with water. This is a textbook example of subsequent conduct, made relevant by Section 8. It's the action of a guilty man trying to destroy the evidence. Now, to really get how courts connect these dots, look at this simple example about footmarks. No single step here proves guilt on its own, but each one is an inference that builds on the last. You go from the general idea that criminals run away to the specific fact that these footprints match this person's shoes. It's a ladder of logic, and that's how circumstantial evidence works. It creates a powerful chain of probability. But Donnellan's suspicious behavior didn't stop with the bottles. He then actively tried to prevent doctors from examining the body, using what the record calls disingenuous contrivances. This is another prime example of subsequent conduct under Section 8. You have to ask yourself, would an innocent man try to stop an autopsy? No, he'd welcome it to clear his name. A guilty man, on the other hand? And there's more. Later, at the coroner's inquest, when his own mother-in-law, Lady Broughton, mentioned that he had rinsed the bottles, Donnellan was seen trying to stop her from talking. This is another incredibly powerful piece of subsequent conduct, a direct attempt to suppress evidence and intimidate a witness. So, what do we have? The prosecution has laid out a whole chain of facts, a clear motive, careful preparation, the smell of poison, and a pattern of suspicious conduct afterwards. What happens when you connect all of those legally relevant links? Well, the jury considered this entire chain of circumstantial evidence, and with each link made admissible by the very principles we've been talking about, they found John Donnellan guilty of murder. See, no single fact would have been enough on its own, but together they formed a chain that was strong enough to convict. All right, so for your exams, let's boil this all down. Here's what you absolutely need to walk away with. 1. Legal relevancy is a practical tool, not a philosophical debate. 2. Sections 6 through 11 of the Indian Evidence Act are your roadmap. They provide the clear framework. 3. Facts become relevant when you can show they are a cause, an effect, a motive, a preparation, or a form of conduct. And finally, a strong case isn't just one piece of evidence. It's a chain built from many relevant facts. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The Evidence Act tells us which facts, which links are allowed to be part of the chain. But it's ultimately up to the court to decide. Just how strong is that chain, really? Is it strong enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? That right there is the ultimate question at the heart of every single trial.